Oftentimes, the version of faith that we inherit is caught more than taught. And one of the things that I noticed growing up was that if I studied hard enough, what I thought was that eventually I could arrive at some sort of certainty because we had the Bible on our side and we could explore that and through it get answers and we would know God and we would understand morality and we would get at the meaning of life. Oftentimes, faith was being used, the word faith, as a way to bypass questions that we didn't want to research or ideas that might challenge our worldview or truths that could be uncomfortable. I haven't heard many people's stories that go like this, where you wake up one day and you decide, I'm going to stop believing today. What usually happens is quieter than that. You go, oh, but what about this? And what about that? And I have doubts on that. And you have to decide what you're going to do with all of it. And once that began to materialize in me, something bigger began to collapse. Because when certainty disappears, it doesn't really just take beliefs with it. For me, what it did was the very structure that I had built my identity on began to break and fall apart. I knew there was a maturing that needed to happen and a massive change, and I couldn't go back to the way that I was. All of that raised another question that I've been thinking about for a number of years now. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. What happens to God after certainty? So my breakup with Christianity and the way I believed as a kid was a long, ugly process where if you have ever gone through one of those breakups where you're breaking up with someone, but you're also like holding each other and you don't want to let each other go, but you got to leave. That was my relationship with certainty. Maybe because your church is not LGBTQ affirming and you're like, oh, I don't know about that. Or you've seen the rise of Christian nationalism, or maybe you went to a church that believed in like young earth creationism and those verses began to be challenged for you. Maybe you experienced church hurt of some kind, or you saw Bible contradictions, or for me, the birth of my son made me realize, man, like I can't believe in this idea of eternal conscious torment anymore. I just don't see it. I don't believe it. Maybe the death of a loved one too early or tragically sent you on a journey of doubt and wondering, and you couldn't hold it all together anymore. Side note, I don't think a lot of people go on this journey because it's the cool thing to do, but I've heard that message spread by people who look at deconstruction as this like horrible enemy that they need to combat. It takes everything from us. To be clear, it cost me everything to choose to be this honest. Becoming less sure of my Christianity has done nothing but made my external life harder and more complicated, not easier because I got to sin more. My relationships are more difficult in how I communicate within them. I doubt myself more. I needed therapy and counseling. I lost my cosmic dad, my father in the sky. Like I had to process who so much of my world because of how I grew up as both a missionary kid, a pastor's kid, as someone who was a pastor and told people how to believe. It was not an easy journey. And so refusing to fully accept my lack of certainty was sort of the first step where I was like, I don't really want to go on this journey. You could call it denial. If you've, the 5 stages of grief, that's where most of the time you're going to start, where you're going, I don't want to go down this road. It's going to be really complicated. Kind of just, can we keep that door shut for a while? I got mad next. I got angry that Pandora's box was opened. I got mad that it felt like the church lied to me, that I fell for it. Like, was I in a cult? I got frustrated that, like, in moments where I did believe that maybe God was still real, it was like, why would God create me? Or why would God let us believe all these false things about them? I lost my old life. I was angry about that I lost my vocabulary. I lost my vocation and what I was doing for a job. All of that created anger. But then that turned into something else. And that turned into depression, which was, okay, I can't ignore this anymore. And I can't just be angry about it. I have no more energy for that. And so it became despair and feelings of sadness and hopelessness. Like, I'm not going to be able to dig out of this. And I just spent my 20s on this thing that I no longer believe or can get behind. And this grief set in, this loss of who I used to be set in. And then that gave way to something else. I'm talking about this stuff 5 years in retrospect. So this was not a quick process. And in many ways, I still feel much of those three emotions, depression, anger, and denial, on certain days. But I've come to a place that is much different now. And I'm at a place where I actually enjoy talking about it. I don't protest as much or struggle with the journey. I've come to appreciate actually certain parts of it, which is weird. So that takes me to what I'm going to call Act 2, which is acceptance, epiphany, and wisdom. I bottomed out, and as I lost it all, I think in the last 5 years, other things started to appear. And I can only speak this from my experience because I don't know if it's true for others of you, but tell me your experience, obviously, in the comments or DM me. Beauty started to pop up in the dark night of my soul. There was a return to a level of mystery and sitting with how small I was in this massive universe and reveling in this idea that something created all of it, and sitting in nature and reminding myself that I didn't have to have all this figured out. And maybe where I had gotten in my head was that theology, right, had made me feel like I had a better grasp or understanding on God than I actually did. And I gave space to my experience in a way that I hadn't before. And like I said, beauty started to show up in this dark time in my life. I think discernment and wisdom require finding opposing views and points. Like, how can you figure out what is actually true if you close your eyes and you plug your ears to things that might come into contradiction with a certain way that you're thinking on something, right? Like, I've heard lawyers talk about how you're ready to argue for something if you can take the opponent's perspective and argue from that perspective too, so that you really do understand the issue. On things like theology, God, religion, I'm not the most eloquent speaker. I can't tell you about all the world religions. I just knew I needed to go on a journey because as I got comfortable in not knowing and in uncertainty, I realized how much mystery and how much beauty is in the mystery. I remember stumbling into this Ben Rector song. I think it's called Heroes. I didn't put this part in my notes, but I did pull the lyric where he has this thing where it says, I miss my Bible study leader. Had all the answers for living in the big bad world. Don't know if he still talks to Jesus, but his wife's remarried now, and I think he sells garage doors. That's the line. And the idea of that lyric being that in adolescence, as a kid, I looked for heroes to give me answers, who taught me the Bible, who taught me how to believe. Growing up is realizing that wisdom and discernment stands outside of us, that as soon as we think that we've grasped it, we've lost it. And in the case of this Ben Rector song, like his hero who taught him about God, he sells garage doors. And that's not to poke shame or fun at anybody who sells garage doors. Like, if that's your profession, awesome. But you begin to realize, like, how little do all of us know about the universe? And I think a little bit of what he's saying there is you go, oh, my hero who taught me about God, like they're just another guy. They're just another girl. And it takes the temperature down. It changes the conversation. And you go like, I don't think I can be so certain. I think I need to go on a journey. I think the beauty's in the mystery. Benji, what are you getting at? This is where I want to bring it full circle here. for Act 3. Let's talk about God after certainty. There's a quote from the comedian Pete Holmes, or there's this bit that he does where he talks about the road manager from AC/DC who said, God is the name of the blanket that we put over the mystery to give it a shape. And he has this awesome bit. Go check it out. But that's where I've landed. God after certainty is going, God is the name of the blanket that we put over a mystery to give it a shape. Even like thinking about in Matthew 7:13-14, where he says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction. Many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. How my mind is changed about that verse, about the narrow way that Jesus talked about, is I think about how small the path is that Jesus walked. Not one in like believing rightly, right? But in the fact that like even the best estimate, 2 out of 8 people on the planet claim to believe in Jesus, right? I think that's the most generous of numbers. Think about the way that he walked and talked. That's the narrow way, a much less percentage than 2 out of 8 of all people. That's what's next to impossible to get right. That level of, when you think about Jesus, the level of love for other, humility, death, for a world that misunderstood him and forgiving anyway, all of that is more beautiful to me now because I go, yeah, even in church circles, the way of love, of humility, of care for neighbor, those things, the narrow way, so few ever tap into. What a mystery that we live in the middle of. For me, it took me to this place of recognition that experience can do one of two things. Either it can inflate your pride and you can start to think you're better than you actually are, or it can reduce your ego. And I think if you're wise, the longer you study, the more it makes you less certain. As somebody who does media for a living, nuance doesn't win you fans very often. People want really clear black and white. But if you want real wisdom, you're going to have to jump into the nuance. So I'm going to close by reading a couple things. Wisdom Takes Work, Ryan Holiday. This hit me at the perfect time. And this really gets at why I don't feel like I need certainty anymore. And why I've realized like I'm comfortable in the space of going, I want to see and like lean into a bunch of different traditions and understand and process and find beauty in the conversation, because I think that's what wisdom is. But here's a section. I'll just read this for you. The poet John Keats found that the more he learned about existence, the less he understood. The more he tried to grasp or explain the essence of something, the more it escaped him. The artist's great skill then, he said, was negative capability, the ability to be in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. He would explain that understanding was like entering a large mansion of many apartments. The first chamber or chambers are simple and bright. He called this the infant or thoughtless chamber. As long as we don't think too much or question too much, we can pleasantly remain there. But the more we explore, the farther we get into the mansion, the more we are in a mist, he said. We lose our bearings. We find darkness and confusion. We feel, he said, the burden of the mystery. This, of course, is the world of the artist, especially the poet, the unknown, the ineffable, the majestic, the vastness of human experience. For an artist, there is no black and white, even when they paint or photograph in that form. But wait, isn't wisdom the ability to make things simple? It is. And the simple truth is that things are complicated. It would be wonderful if study and mastery led to certainty, but they most certainly do not. I have for some time, Admiral Rickover warned young people, thought that a few of our present ills stem from this chiding faith in the existence of perfect answers. It requires a degree of maturity to realize that all solutions are partial ones, and that all conclusions are snapshots, estimations, and guesses. Art, leadership, and enlightenment demand the ability to handle ambiguity. They require a strong tolerance for contradiction. You have to be able to deal with the mystery and the mist because they never go away. You know, some people deconstruct and they don't look back, and I get it. It's still really difficult for me to hear certain things, to not view scripture through an old lens, to even look at, I just don't look at the Bible the same way. You know, it's taken years for me to see the beauty in prayer. All of that to say, my experience has been, as I pulled the threads and I deconstructed and I went back to the foundations, I didn't personally doubt the existence of something bigger, something beautiful, something at the very foundations, a mystery that was good. That's the foundation, the bedrock that I landed on. And from that place, I got really comfortable, and I'm trying to just, sit in the fact that I won't have it figured out, and that I want to ask better questions, and that I don't want previous experience or, a book to tell me this is the way it is. So this is, like let that enlarge my ego or feel like I can just settle. Once you feel like you have wisdom, you don't have wisdom. Once you feel like you understand God, you don't understand God. The mystery is it. I mentioned it earlier, but having a 2-year-old and holding my son, I go like, man, beauty, wonder, amazement, mystery. And I think that right now is the gift. And I don't know what I think on a lot of theological things anymore, and I'm okay with that. And I know that I believe that something is happening that's bigger than us, and I'm good with that. And I love getting to learn and tap in and ask questions and study. And that's where I want to be. So I hope that resonates. There's a lot there. If it did, and there's maybe something that stands out or something, your experience has been different, I would love to hear it. This channel exists to explore the deeper currents beneath, faith and wisdom and our human experience. So drop a comment, DM me. I read everyone. I respond to them all. And that's the beauty of just starting this journey. So thank you for watching this, and I'll see you in the next one.